Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. My name is Jene and tonight I thought I would do a whip and chat. I haven't done a whip and chat in a while and I do apologize. Unfortunately with work and some medical issues, I just haven't had the time or the energy to do this. But I wanted to share with you a story that happened to me when I was 15 years of age. The theme for this whip and chat is what I'm most thankful for. Before we get started with this, I wanted to first say a very happy and safe holiday season for all of you. I hope that your Christmas and New Year's is wonderful and brings you happiness and peace. My Christmas was pretty quiet. Most of my family lives in the States, and my two sons, one lives in Ontario, and my youngest son, as much as I love him to death, and he will always be my son and always will be in my heart, unfortunately, he does not communicate with me, so I'm not 100% sure where he's at. The last time I heard, he was still here in Winnipeg, but that could have changed. I'm not 100% sure. But that's a totally different story. So, what am I most thankful for? I am thankful for my husband, my family, and my husband's family. And I hold them very close in my heart. Also, my friends and all of you here in YouTube. All of my subscribers, all the people that watch the channel. I appreciate you so very much, and I cannot thank you enough for all of your support. So let's jump into this story. But let me get my color here, and that way I can work on this beautiful painting from the Diamond Art Club as I tell you about this story. Now, this happened when I turned 15. Now, my parents, there's a diamond on there. They wanted to make sure that the three of us girls, I'm the youngest of three, stayed out of trouble. And we lived in a very small town in Washington State. And this was a logger town, or a logging town, I guess you can call it. Anyway, there was a lot of teenage drinking and a lot of partying and stuff like that. So my parents wanted to keep us girls away from that type of environment. And the way they did that is they got us involved into horses. Now, horses have always been a huge passion in my life. Even now, I love them to death. But unfortunately, I can no longer ride because of several injuries that were caused by horses. So, yeah. Anyway, that was what my parents did, is they got us involved in horses. And we started showing horses, or at least I did, when I was 12, but I have been riding most of my life. My grandparents had ponies when we were growing up, so we always had ponies to ride before we actually started getting deeply involved in showing. So before I turned 15, I had a quarter horse mare that was my 4-H project. And my mother was a true believer that if you wanted to show your horse, then you have to train that horse. She didn't believe in spending a ton of money on professional training, as she felt that, that was the way that we were supposed to do it ourselves, basically. So, the horse that I rode when I was 14, I did all of my training on her, and she did really well. I was very pleased with her. She was really good in hunter jumper, English classes, things like that. But I was really more into like the Western writing, and she just wasn't equipped for that. She did okay, but she just wasn't. She had the look of a hunter jumper more than she did Western pleasure. Anyway, about September. Now my birthday's in August. In about the end of September, my mother approached me and said to me that she thought that maybe it was time for me to consider working on another project. And I had mentioned to her around my birthday that I was interested in going into like the AAA and the AA shows, the schooling shows, and the breed shows. Now we've been doing schooling shows for years, but I really wanted to compete in the breed and the upper shows. So when I mentioned it to my mother, she was like, you know, I really don't think that Skookie will be a good choice to do that with. Now, Skookie was the mare that I rode. Her name, that was her name. It is kind of an odd name, but that's what we called her. And she was a sweet horse, but she had a lot of get up and go to her. She was about 8 years old, and she really excelled in jumping and things like that. But my mother didn't like it when I jumped because she was afraid I was going to fall and break my neck. I think every parent starts to worry about that when their kids are out there, but I think deep in her heart that she preferred me not to do that. And like I said, my passion was more Western pleasure than it was hunter jumper. So when she approached me and said, you know, I think it's time for you to get into another project, it was kind of a win-win for both of us. And the reason why I say that is because my parents at that time were getting ready to start breeding some of the mares that we had. And they really wanted to breed the mare that I was riding. So that's why she approached me and said, you know, I think it's time for you to get another project. Now, my mother was very strict, and she did not allow me to work outside of the home. So my job was basically to take care of all the horses, the barn, everything. And that way I didn't have to leave and go to work, and more attention was put on my studies than outside work. We started looking for another horse, and my mother made it very clear that she wanted me to get a gelding and not a mare. And that way I didn't have to worry about if they decided they wanted to breed, I didn't lose out on a project for 6 months. So I was kind of happy with that. I was okay with that. Now, we raised quarter horses and Appaloosas. We had an Appaloosa stallion. He was what we call a few spot leopard. Now, a few spot leopard is basically all white with very minimal spots. That is what classified him as what we call a few spot leopard. So we had him, and then we had about 3 or 4 quarter horse mares, and my middle sister had a beautiful Palomino gelding quarter horse, and my oldest sister, she was the oddball in the group. I always call her that. She owned a beautiful Egyptian Arabian, and she was the only one in our family that didn't have a quarter horse. She was just always very fond of Arabians. So we started looking for a quarter horse gelding for me to use as my next project, and the goal is to find a young one usually around 3.5 or 4 years of age, and that had very minimal training. And my mom, love her to death, but she was the one that was really searching, and she came across this ad. Now this is going to age me, guys, because, you know, we're in the age of, you know, the internet and all these gadgets and whatnot. But back when I was 15, the internet didn't exist, and the way we found horses or anything at that matter was the classified ads. So my mom was always checking the classifieds, and she came across this ad on a 3-year-old buckskin gelding quarter horse, and she was really excited because she knew that was my favorite color. Now, a buckskin is a real rich cream color with a black mane and tail, and it was my favorite color. I loved that color. And she found this 3-year-old. Now, he was approximately 3 hours away from where we lived, but my mother was okay with that. She was really excited that she found something that she knew I would really love, and I was excited too. So we packed up one day after school, and she drove me the 3 hours to go see this horse. So we got there and met the owner and the trainer. There was a trainer on him. She had only been working with him for about a month, so he was still classified as Greenbroke, meaning he only knew the basics. He didn't know very much. And my mother was happy with that because she figured, you know what, there really wasn't that much training, so I still would have to do a lot of the work. And as we were speaking to the owner and the trainer, the owner told us that the horse was injured. Now, he didn't say anything about that before we went out to go see him. And that kind of raised some red flags with my mom. She wasn't quite happy with that. But we were already there, so we thought, well, we might as well just take a look and see the horse. They explained what happened. As far as they knew, he had injured himself in his stall, and he was slightly lame in the right front hoof. Now, normally at a 3-year-old, that's not something to be overly concerned about, but it's still something that I think anyone would have, would have liked to have known before coming out and looking at him. And, he wasn't asking for a lot of money for this horse, but it was still, for my parents, it was still quite a bit of money. And anyway, the trainer brought him out. She started working him in front of us in the arena, and you could definitely tell that he was favoring his right hoof. So after about 15-20 minutes, the trainer brought him back in, and my mother and the trainer and owner were talking while I was cooling him down and brushing him, just basically getting to know him. Now, his name was Timber, and he was a big horse. He was about 15.3, I believe. So he's pretty good size, and very, very gentle, very soft, just very calm and easygoing. Now, my mother did not speak to the owner and the trainer in front of me. She chose to do that away from me, which now that I look back, I can completely understand. But basically the conversation was that she would prefer to have had my vet come out and take a look at him, and asked if that was okay. Now, the problem with this, and I'm going to be honest, Sorry, I gotta keep that down or it pops up. When you're dealing with buying an animal from anyone, it doesn't matter what kind of animal it is, any type of breeder, you're always taking a chance, unless you know this person or this breeder personally, you're always taking a chance of a breeder that may not give you the full picture of the health of that animal. Now, some of you that have been following me for a while know that I'm a small dog breeder. And one thing that I tell people and are looking for a puppy, one thing I will tell them, whatever you do, make sure you ask questions. And if your answers are not to your satisfaction, then ask if is there a guarantee to the puppy, any animal that you're purchasing. 2, if you can see proof of any type of testing that was done on the parents. This is crucial because, especially in the dog world, there's specific tests that we perform before we breed. And the reason why we do that is because certain breeds are typically known to have hereditary conditions that can be passed on from generation to generation. And that's the reason why I say if you're going to buy, especially a dog, make sure that you ask for the pedigree of the parents and the testing that was performed on those parents prior to breeding. Now, if you come across a breeder that says to you, "Oh, yeah, you know what, you can trust me, this has all been done," my suggestion to you is go ahead and, take a look at the puppies, graciously say thank you, and turn away and walk away from it. The reason why I say that is because if they're not willing to produce that information that you're asking for, or if they're telling you that you can trust them and you don't know them, they're usually got something to hide. So be very cautious when you purchase any animals. It could be a dog, a cat, a horse, a bird. Make sure you get all of your information and all the health records of the parents and so on. That way it just protects you as the purchaser and the pet owner. Now, in the case of this horse, the owner agreed and said to my mom that it was fine, that if we wanted to bring our vet out to take a look at the horse, he was very happy to allow us to do so. So that kind of made my mother feel a little bit better about the whole thing, because like I said, usually if they've got something to hide, they don't want your vet around them. And this owner was willing to let us bring our vet over to take a look at this horse. Now, of course, that's money out of our pocket, but it's also a peace of mind. And as I said before, there are some breeders out there or owners that don't want you to know that there could be certain type of health issues back there. So we went home and my mother called our vet, explained the situation to him, and he agreed to come out to take a look at the horse. So they worked out a date and time with the owner of the horse, and I believe it was like 3 days later we went back out there. Now, the owner wasn't able to make it, but the trainer was there, and she brought out the horse and started working with him again in the arena, and he still was favoring his right hoof. Now, the vet watched. He didn't say anything to anyone. He just stood there and watched the horse move, and once the trainer was done with him, and I think she was out there working the horse for about 15 minutes, she brought him back into the grooming area, and my vet went up to him and asked the trainer, do you mind me putting my hands on the horse? And she goes, no, go right ahead. So he started examining the horse, and he must have spent at least 30 minutes checking him over. And after that 30 minutes, he looked at my mother and he says, and he kind of looked at his watch like he was, and he said, you know what, I'm going to be late for my next appointment. So I'm going to leave and I will give you a call this evening and we can discuss. He says, but right now I have to really go. So he left, and my mother told the trainer, she said, listen, we're really interested in this horse, but I don't want to commit to anything until I speak to the vet. And she's like, no, not a problem. And so me and my mother went into the car and we headed home. Now, that was a very quiet ride home. And the reason why it was very quiet is because I had already become attached to this horse. Even though I didn't own him, I was already attached to him. I already, in my mind, this is what I wanted. And there was no way anyone was going to change that in my head. Now, as a 15-year-old, you kind of think, okay, there's nothing going to be wrong with this horse. He's a youngster, he's healthy, he looks good, other than he's limping, all in all, he didn't look that bad. So when we got home, it was probably about maybe 8 o'clock that night, and my mother said, you know what, you need to go upstairs and do your homework, and when the vet calls, I'll let you know, and we'll talk about what he recommends and says. So, like I said, as a 15-year-old, you're kind of like, oh, you're really nervous, and lots of things were going in my head. I was like, oh, okay, this is what I'm going to do with this horse. This is how I'm going to train him. This is what I'm going to get. I'm going to save my money up for this, that, and the other. And I heard the phone ring, and I could hear my mother talking. So I knew it was the vet, but I couldn't hear exactly what was being said. And that was, really, that was the hard part, is not knowing what was actually being said. So anyway, about 30 minutes, my mother knocked on the door and she says, I think you better come downstairs. We need to discuss, this phone call. And so I came downstairs and she looked at me and she goes, now you do realize that I was on the phone with the vet? And I said, yes, I could tell it was, but I didn't know what you were saying. So she says, you know what, I think you need to sit down. Now, usually when anyone tells you to sit down, it's not going to be good. You just know. So I sat down. And my mom looked at me and she said, the vet feels he's 90% sure that this horse has navicular disease. My heart sunk. Now, navicular disease is, well, first of all, navicular, there's a navicular bone in the hoof of the horse. And navicular disease affects the hoof. What it does is it causes excruciating pain to the animal. Now, it's similar to arthritis. They can have really good days, and then they can have really bad days. And those flare-ups can cause a lot of discomfort. There is no cure for this problem. It is usually hereditary. And the only way that you can keep the horse comfortable, well, there's a couple ways. I'm sure that there are new and improved ways of taking care of this problem, but back then there was two ways of controlling it. One was oral medication and one was a nerve block or a shot. My mother just looked at me and she says, I know that you really were hoping that this was going to be the horse for you. And she says, honestly, I was hoping the same thing. She said, but I do not want to take on a horse that possibly has navicular. The only way you can determine 100% if the horse had navicular at the time, like I said, we're talking the early 80s here, was through an x-ray. And my mother's like, I'm not putting that kind of money into a horse that we do not own. So as much as I was disappointed, I completely understood where she was coming from, and I accepted it. So the search went on, and my mother found another horse for me to take a look at. And that one also didn't turn out. Now, it had nothing to do with health. It just, this particular horse that she wanted me to look at was actually trained in a discipline that I did not ride in. And by the time we went out to take a look at him and I rode him, let's just put it this way. I ended up leaving that experience with not remembering how I got from one area of the arena to the other. He was trained as a barrel racer, and I'm not very comfortable with speed. And needless to say, by the time I got off of the horse, I had a cut leg from my leg actually rubbing up against the barrel that he went around. Yeah, it was kind of messy. Anyway, after we took a look at that one, I just told my mom, I said, as much as I thought he was a nice horse, I just didn't think it would be fair to that particular horse if I were to try to retrain him in a totally different type of discipline that he was used to. Now, this horse was 8 years old, so he was already accustomed to barrel racing for many years. So it just wouldn't have been fair to that horse and or myself trying to train him into a Western pleasure horse. Just wouldn't have been fair. So my mother agreed. She thought that was a reasonable way of thinking. And we went home, and another week went by, and I was looking at the Saturday classified ads, and there was an ad in the paper that read, double registered, 3/4 Arabian buckskin, 3-year-old, green broke. I was like, wow, okay. So I was kind of excited, and I showed my mom the ad, and she kind of looked at me really strange. She said, you do realize this is an Arabian? And I said, yes, I do realize that. And she says, well, I didn't realize that you wanted an Arabian. And I said, well, is there really a difference? I mean, the whole purpose of 4-H is that you take a project on, you work with that project and show that project, and to develop a working relationship. So I just told her, I said, for me, it doesn't matter if it's a quarter horse or Arabian. It could be an Appaloosa. It doesn't matter. It's something that I would like to take a look at. Doesn't mean that we have to buy it or anything. And she just kind of looked at me. She's just really, I think, surprised. But like I said, I mean, we were a family of quarter horse people, other than my oldest sister, who owned an Arabian. So it wasn't really out of place, really. I mean, my sister had one. Anyway, so we talked about it for a bit, and then she said, okay, I will call the owner and see if we can go out and take a look at this horse. Now, they were probably about an hour away from where we lived. So, and this was around, it was early in the morning. It was before noon, but it wasn't like before 9 in the morning. Anyway, she called the owner and explained to the owner that we were interested in taking a look at the horse. And my mom asked if there was any way that we could come out and take a look at him this afternoon, or that afternoon. And the owner was like, sure, you know, if you would like to come out and take a look at him, that'd be perfect. So we told her we would be there around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We wanted to get there somewhat early because this was like the end of September and the days were getting shorter. So she wanted to get there before 5. So we told her that we would be leaving our place at 2, most likely be at her place at 3. And she was perfectly good with that. So we left and headed out to her place to take a look at this horse. Now, I kept telling myself as we were getting closer not to get overly excited. Definitely not, you know, don't get attached, because I didn't want to go through that heartache of what I went through with the first horse. So when we got there, you know, I tried to contain myself, and, you know, like I said, I was only 15, and I was really excited. So the lady comes out and she starts talking to both myself and my mother, and I could tell she was really looking me over. And she asked me, she says, are you sure you don't want to take a look at the other horse that I have for sale? And I kind of looked at her surprised. I said, well, why are you asking? And she says, well, I'm just letting you know that, you know, the other horse, he's 15.3, and the one that you're interested in, he's only 15 hands. And I said, well, you know, honestly, I'm okay with 15 hands. I know that, you know, 15.3 probably would be better. You see, at 15 years of age, I was 5 feet 6 inches. And I think she was worried that I would be disappointed if I got a horse that was only 15 hands. But to me, you know, I didn't look too big on him because, you know, I'm not very big boned, so I didn't really think too much of it. She just kind of smiled at me and she says, okay. She says, well, I'll be bringing him out. And she went out to the barn, and about 5 minutes later, here she comes walking out with this just drop dead gorgeous buckskin Arabian. And the whole time I just kept reminding myself, don't get excited, don't get excited. Oh, he was beautiful, just beautiful. And she brought him up to me, and usually when you bring up a horse, especially to a stranger, you don't want to get them too close because sometimes horses can spook. You just never know. But she brought him up close enough where he can stretch out his neck, and he started sniffing me, which is something that most animals will do to try to get to know you. They're basically just trying to get to know your smell. And he, you know, kept sniffing me, and then the next thing I know, he's taking his nose and he starts to nudge me. You know, he's pushing his nose up against me, and I'm like, okay, am I supposed to panic? Is this normal? The owner, she just kind of chuckled a little bit, and she's like, you know, he does that when he likes you. And I'm like, okay. So she hands me the lead rope, and she says, why don't you go ahead and walk him around and see how comfortable you both are, and then we can go from there. So I thought, okay. So I started walking around with him, and he was very quiet, always curious about who I was, and he would stop a little bit, he'd sniff me, and then he'd nudge me a little bit more, and then we just kept walking. And anyway, that went on for about maybe 5 minutes. And I stopped, and when I stopped, he sniffed me again, and then the next thing I know, he put his head up against my chest and just kind of like sighed. He just melted my heart. I mean, the whole time I'm like, oh my gosh, anyway, the owner just smiled at me, and she says, I've never seen him take to somebody like this. She says, there's something about you that he really likes. Now, I'm thinking my mom was probably going, okay, this is just, weird, or this could be a good selling point, one of the two. But I had never had a horse do that to me, where they just felt so comfortable with a stranger that they wanted you to cradle them in that way. So anyway, she starts to explain to us about the gelding, and she says, oh, and by the way, his name is Shamrock. And I just kind of looked at her, and I'm like, really? He was born on St. Patrick's Day. So his name is Shamrock. And she said, we can go ahead and put him back in the barn or out in the pasture, whichever. And I can show you all of his paperwork and everything that he has done. She said, but unfortunately, we don't have an arena here. So she said, if you wanted to try him out, we would have to make arrangements to trailer him to a friend's house that has an arena that you can actually ride him. And in some way, I was kind of disappointed, because I was really hoping that I could do that at that moment. But that's when I noticed that they really didn't have any area to ride him. So she'd explained that they had just purchased the place, and they were still doing a lot of work on the property. They just never gotten around to doing the arena, and most likely they weren't going to get to it until the next spring. So we put Shamrock back into the barn, into his stall, and she showed us the brother. They were full brothers, the other horse that she was selling. And yeah, he was big. He was big. And not only was he big, he was very spirited. She had a hard time controlling him, and I'm thinking, and you wanted me to try this one out? He just was a ball of energy, and most likely because he probably was cooped up in the stall all day, but still, I was thinking there's no way. Whereas Shamrock, he went in his stall, and he was very quiet. He just kind of stuck his head over the door, and every time I'd move, he would watch me, and I'd start scratching at him. She gave me an apple to give him. He took that from me, and he was very gentle, very quiet and very gentle. So anyway, we went and spoke to the owner for about an hour in her house, and she showed us all the papers and actually gave us copies of them. And my mother asked the question, and that's where I thought, oh, here we go. Now, my mother asked her if she would be offended if we were to have our veterinarian come out with us to check Shamrock over. And that way, we could do that, and I can test him out at that time. And she smiled at my mom. She says, no, I have no problems with that at all. She said, if you want to do that, then just let me know what day, and she says, I'll make sure that all the arrangements are made and let you know where to go. So me and my mother, when we left there, felt pretty good about everything. So we got home, and of course I had to go out and do the stalls and take care of the horses, and my mother called our vet and spoke to him, and he basically let her know when he would be able to do it. And then my mom called the owner of Shamrock and said, okay, you think that we could come out on Monday, which would have been 2 days from then? And the owner said, sure. She says, you know what, I'll call my friend and make sure that that's okay and let you know. But she says, I don't think that'll be a problem. So they made the arrangements, and we went out Monday night. Her friend had an indoor arena, so we could turn on the lights and everything, and it was really nice there too. Anyway, so we met them around 6 o'clock Monday night, and our vet came with us. And the first thing that the owner did was she had him in his halter and along what we call lunge line, and she started working him under the lunge line. And our vet basically just stood there and watched. You know, he didn't ask for anything. And then she asked me if I brought a saddle, and I said, yes, I did. And she says, okay. She says, well, bring your saddle in, and we'll get all the tack on him, and, you know, you can sit on him and do whatever you need to do to test him out, and go from there. Now, remember, he's greenbroke, meaning that he doesn't really know too much under saddle. So basically, I just brought my working saddle with me just so that I can just get a feel of how he's going to feel under saddle. And a light bit, something that you know, wouldn't hurt him in any way. Oops. And got him saddled up, put the bit in his mouth, got on his back, and oh my gosh, he was just amazing. He just did everything that I asked him to do, and it was basically just very basic stuff, walk, jog. I didn't ask him to canter because I figured, you know what, I didn't want to press my luck, but he did really well considering, you know, that he was considered greenbroke. So after I was done there, we brought him back, excuse me, brought him back into the grooming area and took his saddle off. I started brushing him down, and as I was doing that, our vet asked the owner if it was okay if he started to do, you know, an examination on him, and she said, sure, go right ahead. And he was probably with Shamrock for about maybe 15-20 minutes. And then he looked at my mom and he said, you know, he says, it's really getting late and I really need to get home. Now, when I heard him say that, I thought, uh-oh. Because it was the same type of response he had with the other horse. And he said, but, you know, he says, how about if I call you later on tonight? And then he looked at the owner and he says, you know, very nice horse. And she said, thank you. And he left. And my heart sunk. Because all I can think of is, here we go again. You know, so after, you know, brushing him and getting him ready to leave, I helped the owner get him back in the trailer, tied him down for her, and I watched as they pulled off. And I remember looking at my mother, but didn't say anything, and I think she could see it in my face that I was really kind of upset, because I didn't know, you know, I was as much as I didn't want to get myself attached to something, I just, you know, he melted my heart. And anyway, we went home, and I had to go do my chores, so I went out to the barn. I was cleaning stalls, getting the horses ready to be put in the barn and, you know, shedding everything up for the night. And when I got in the house, my mom looked at me and she says, well, I think you better sit down. And I said, okay. I said, did you hear from the vet? And she says, yes. She says, I heard from him. And I said, okay. And she says, well, she said, you know, he basically said to me that we would be crazy if we didn't buy that horse. And all of that fear was gone. And I was so excited because I was like, oh, this is great. You know, and of course, all those things running in my head was, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to train them, and this is what I'm going to do with them, and blah, 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 blah. And on, I mean, just the little hamsters were just running. And I was so excited. So my mom said, you know, I still need to talk to your stepfather about this. You know, it's quite a bit of money, but I will talk to him when he gets home, and then, you know, go from there. And I wasn't too worried because my stepfather, you know, he's pretty easygoing. So I thought, okay, you know. So I went upstairs and started doing my homework. So I heard my stepfather come in, and my mother was talking to him and told him, you know, what the vet said. And he was like, yeah. He said, if the vet feels that he's healthy and he's worth the money that she's asking for, then by all means, you know, let's do it. And I was so happy, you know. So my mother told me that she was going to call her. She says, but, you know, here's the but though. My parents, you know, they didn't have a lot of extra money. And as I said, the reason that they did this for us girls is because they wanted us to stay out of, you know, that partying type atmosphere. So, I mean, they really didn't have a ton of money. And they basically told me that, you know, they're willing to do this, but unfortunately they would have to do it in payments. They wouldn't be able to pay it, you know, pay her outright. And she said, so we're just letting you know that there's a big chance that she's going to say no, you know. And I mean, I kind of understood what she was saying. I mean, I understood the money situation and all that stuff. So she just, I guess, wanted to prepare me for that possibility. And I'm like, okay, you know, I understand. And so my mother called her and spoke to her for about an hour. And when she was done, she spoke to my stepfather for a bit. She didn't really want me, I guess, involved in this part of it, but she basically talked to my stepfather, like I said, and then she brought me in and she said, well, the thing is that she said there is another person that's coming out to take a look at this horse, and she said that if they decide not to purchase him, and she said, let's say they came in with cash, that she would have to do that, even though we saw him first. But she said if they decide not to purchase him, then she would definitely do what my mother had suggested. So it was like a roller coaster ride. I can't explain it better than that. It was like up, down, up, down. I was like, oh my gosh. I had to go to school the next day. And oh my gosh, I was kind of beside myself because all I can think of is I really want this horse. And I was afraid that, you know, I wasn't going to get him. Now, it was completely out of my hands. I mean, there was really not much I can do. And I just remember that night before I went to bed, praying that, asking God not only to get me through the next day, because, I mean, I was going to be at basket case, but to also somehow see if it would be in our favor, you know. I didn't want to, you know, come across as begging, but it, you know, it doesn't hurt to ask. So anyway, that morning I got up and got ready for school and took care of the horses, got them fed, got them watered, got them outside, and yeah. Came back in the house, got my backpack, got my books, and was heading out the door, and I noticed that my stepfather was home. And my mom came out to wish me a good day and made sure that I got all the horses out. And I said, yeah, everybody's out. I said, is everything okay with Dad? You know, he hasn't gone to work. And she's, oh, he's just not feeling very good. He's kind of under the weather, but she's, no worries, don't worry about it. You know, you go to school, and you know, we'll see you when you get back. And I thought, okay. Yeah, I was a basket case all day. All I can think of is I wanted, you know, I was hoping that everything was going to work out and that we could purchase Shamrock, right? Anyway, I didn't get out of school until 3:30. I usually didn't get home until about 4:30. When I finally got home, I got into the house. Now, guys, I can remember this. I mean, clear as day, as if it happened yesterday. I walked into the house. I opened up the door to my to the staircase to go up to my room. I put my backpack down on the staircase, and I was getting ready to put my boots on to go outside to start working in the barn. And there was my mom and my stepdad sitting at the dining table. And my mother was glaring at me. I mean, literally glaring. And I remember looking at her. My mother scared me sometimes. I mean, she put the fear of God in me. And I remember looking at her going, is everything okay? And she looked at me with this straight, unhappy look and said, do you think you forgot something this morning? And I stood there and I started thinking, I'm like, no, did I forget something? Did I leave the water on or something? She's, I think you need to go out to the barn and take care of the problem. I said, what problem? She's, you need to go out to the barn. Now, when my mom starts to talk like that, you didn't question her at all. You just did what she told you to do. So I had my boots on, I got my sweatshirt, and I started heading out towards the barn. Now, I'm telling you, I should have noticed a few cute things. One, our truck and horse trailer were connected, and that normally isn't like that unless we were going to a horse show. I didn't notice it though, but it was like that. And as I was walking towards the barn, my sisters were in the barn, which wouldn't be abnormal, but they were both in the back of the barn where there was no horse. There was no horse in that stall. That stall was completely empty. It was not being used. And they were back there. And then when they saw me, they started walking up towards me. And I remember my oldest sister saying to me, you know, you really shouldn't forget to do things in the morning. I'm like, what did I forget? I mean, I kind of was careful because I knew my mom was behind me. So I didn't want to get, you know, smacked in the back of the head. And believe me, my mom would have done it. But I just looked at her and I said, what do you mean? And she says, you need to go to the back of the barn. And I said, well, but nobody's back there. And she says, no, you really need to go look. After my sister said, you know, you really need to go to the back of the barn, I was getting really nervous. So I started heading out to the back of the barn. I had absolutely no idea what I was going to find. And that's when I noticed that all the horses were in their stalls. Usually, I'm the one that would bring the horses in after I've put all their food in their bens and cleaned out their stalls. So I thought it was really strange that all the horses were already in their stalls. They were already munching away, and both my sisters had this look on their face, like, it's hard to explain. They all looked really upset with me for some reason. I couldn't figure it out. So I started heading, like I said, towards the back of the barn, and I noticed something moving in that back stall. And as I approached that stall, and I was almost afraid to look in there, but when I did, I literally fell to my knees and started crying. And I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional right now. It was Shamrock. My parents took the day off, had already made arrangements that night. My mother said that that they didn't know, if she was going to agree to their terms. So all day at school, I was thinking, oh my gosh, if someone else is going to take a look at this horse, they're going to buy him, and I'm not going to get him. And all that time, they had already made arrangements to pick him up. And I sobbed for probably a good 30 minutes. I couldn't believe that there was this horse in that stall that I really wanted. And the next thing I remember, my mother came up to me. She put her arms around me and she said, we knew you wanted him. And she said, we found a way to get him. And she said, now it is your responsibility to do what you can with this horse. Yeah, I'll never forget that. They made it so special, and a memory that I will never forget. I had Shamrock for 8 years, and the first year that I had him, he basically, we just spent a lot of time, a lot of work, getting him ready for shows. The first year we concentrated mostly on schooling shows, and he was amazing. In July, there is a show that all 4-Hers go to. It's called Pre-Fair. And this is a show that would qualify you to go to state fair. And the way you could qualify to go to state fair is that you had to accumulate a certain amount of points during that particular show. Now, I'd only had Shamrock for 9 months. And as I said, he was still very green broke, and but he was progressing and he did really well. One thing that we had to do was, if you were to qualify for state fair, you had to get a blue ribbon or higher to qualify. And one thing that it was really important for me. I mean, it was just like, okay, if I could do this, if we can make it, then that would be like the ultimate thing, especially for myself and Shamrock, because we'd only been together for a short period of time. And with him, being not professionally trained, but trained by myself, it would be an honor to be able to go. And the thing about state fair is that only a certain amount of riders were allowed to go. So in our area, there was only 6 riders out of 38 horses that could go. And yeah, it was nerve-wracking, I can tell you that. I don't want to draw out too much of this story, but basically my parents had to leave that weekend, so it was left for my sister, my middle sister, to get me to that show and, you know, keep my fingers crossed that everything was going to work out. Now, my sister was not able to go to State Fair because of her age. There was an age limit there. And what she did is that she's like, you know what, listen, I'm going to get you as prepared as possible, because if you do not get a blue ribbon in halter class, then you're not going. It's not possible. So she, for 2 weeks, was on me constantly. You got to do this, you got to do this, you got to make sure you do this, don't do that. You know, I mean, she was on me constantly. And it got so bad at one point that we didn't speak, because I was stubborn and she was stubborn. I know it, you know, as an adult looking at it now, it was her trying to get me to that point, and I was just getting frustrated with her. So when that day came and I had to get him into the trailer, get him out to the show, get him ready, I found out at that time that my sister, the one I didn't want to speak to anymore, was the ring steward. So she was actually in the arena with the judge. And one thing that she told me, whatever you do, you need to be either the first horse in or the last horse in. The reason why she told me that was because the judge is either going to see the first horse and it'll be memorable, or the last horse, because those are the two that she'll see first and last. There were, remember, 38 horses competing, or 38 riders, I should say, handlers. So this is out of my comfort zone, being first or last. I usually was in the middle. So I decided, you know what, I'm going first. I mean, might as well, right? So I was the first one in, and I remember looking at my sister going, I can't believe this. She didn't really look at me that much, but so this is how it worked. You go into the class, in halter class, you walk your horse in and you line up. Now, like I said, there was 38 horses. So the first half of us went in, and then once we got in and we were lined up, the judge is kind of walking back and forth, kind of looking over everyone and the horses. Then the judge would hand a piece of paper to the ring steward. The ring steward would take it up to the announcer, and then the announcer would say, this is the pattern that you must follow for the judge. Now the pattern was, like, you had the fence, and the horse's bum was up against towards the fence, and the rest of us, you know, the front part of the horse and the person is facing the opposite side of the arena. The ring steward was halfway up in the middle of the arena, and the pattern was, you walked up to the ring steward, you turned your horse about 3/4 of the way around, and on the other side of the arena, the judge stood and watched you. You would go halfway at a trot and stop, set your horse up for inspection. The judge would then inspect your horse and watch you show and present your horse. Then you had to trot the horse away, stop, do another turn, 3/4 turn, stop again, set your horse up for inspection. The judge would watch you in the middle of the arena, and then you had to trot your horse back in line. So that was the pattern. Sounds simple, but 4-H has specific rules. So one thing that you always had to remind yourself when you were turning your horse, that you always turned your horse away from you, not towards you. The reason for that is safety reasons. If anything were to happen and the horse spooks and you're turning the horse away from you, then the horse isn't going to hit you. If you're turning the horse towards you, though, that horse is most likely going to knock you over. So you had to remember all of these safety rules in the process of all this stuff. So I was the first one that had to do this pattern. So I did exactly what they told me to do. Walk up to the ring steward, turn my horse 3/4 of the way, and I was telling myself, turn the horse away from you. So I did, and I taught him how to spin on the back of his legs. So he spun around, and his back legs did not move, but his front legs, and he spun fast. I mean, it was like whoosh, you know. Anyway, I spun him around. I trotted him to the center of the arena, stopped, set him up for inspection. The judge came over. She started to examine the horse, and as she was examining, we had to do what we call quartering. So if she was in the front quarter of the horse, then your body was on the same side the judge was on. But as soon as she went to the back quarter of the horse, you had to go to the other side. And so you had to kind of remember to do that as you're going and as she's examining the horse. Even though you think the judge isn't watching you, they are. You also have to watch for the little hair flicks and stuff like that. Like if they flick the mane and the mane's on the other side of the horse that it shouldn't be, then you kind of have to flick it back without them seeing it. Yeah, it gets kind of complicated. So anyway, she did the examination, and when she was done, she looked at me and said, okay, you can complete the rest of the pattern. And I acknowledged her. I turned around, trotted him off, stopped at the other side of the arena, spun him around again, and then trotted back in line. Now, halter class, because there's so many horses there, could take up to 2 hours to go through. So you had to wait through all of those horses to find out where you placed. And the whole time that this was going on, because I was the first one to do it, I'm sitting there looking at my sister going, okay, did I do okay? She never once looked at me. Never once. And I thought, okay, I didn't do a good job because she's not even looking at me. Sorry, I'm just yapping away, not doing this, but so I think we were probably out there for close to 2 hours, if not longer than that. And when it was done and everyone was brought in, they only brought in 15 of us. The rest of the group was already awarded their ribbons, and the rest of us that still didn't have ribbons were basically lined up in the arena, and they started going through the blues. So I knew I got a blue, or I didn't get one at all. I didn't get a ribbon at all, because that's what I was thinking, is I didn't even place. But so we got through all the blues, and there was 5 people still standing, and that was me and 4 other people. And the whole time I'm looking at my sister going, oh my God, did I not even place? Because I mean, that's my self-esteem was not very high at the time. And yeah, so I kept looking at my sister, and she wasn't looking at me at all. And so then now they were going through the high blues, with what usually would indicate are the ones that would most likely go to state fair. And I'm still standing there going, okay. So they call 3 of the 5, which left 2 of us standing, me and another girl. Now the other girl that was standing had been showing horses since she was like, I don't know, 4 or 5. I mean, she'd been showing for years. and, you know, had a lot of professional training, on the horse. So she was, I mean, she knew what she was doing. And I was standing there with her, and I'm like, we're both looking at each other going, really? So I kept looking at my sister, and she still would not look at me. And I'm like, okay, I'm really shocked at this point, but that's okay. When the announcer came on, she said, okay, it's now time to present our reserve champion and our grand champion. And I was like in shock because I was still there, and it was only two of us. And when the announcer called the number for the reserve champion, I just started screaming because it wasn't my number. And I jumped and put my arms around my horse. I just put my arms around Shamrock, and I thought, my God, I can't believe this. And they announced my number as the grand champion. And as soon as they announced my number, my sister ran to me, and she was crying. And she said to me, she said, you know, I knew you could do it. She said, you just needed to prove to yourself that you could do it. And then she hugged me and she says, I am so proud of you. And those two things, what my parents did and then what my sister did, to get me to State Fair, was two things I will never, ever forget. And I will forever be grateful to them. I mean, I can't tell you how much I love my sister and how much I love my parents. And yeah. And that year was one of those types of years that was like a journey that you almost feel like you're dreaming, and that at one moment you may wake up. Shamrock was, not only did he get me to State Fair, not only did we get to State Fair, but when we went to State Fair, out of 134 horses, he was the top 18th horse in the state. And I was so proud of him. And I know my mother and my father were very proud of how far both me and Shamrock got. Now, I have to be honest though, before State Fair, I would say about 2 weeks before State Fair, I did something really stupid. And remember, Shamrock was classified as a Greenbroke, so he still was being under trained. You know, I was still training him and getting him prepared. And well, we had a little bit of a disagreement, and I ended up severely spraining my tailbone 2 weeks before we were to go to State Fair. Now, my doctor said that, you know, he knew that it was important to me, and he said, okay, listen, you can go, but you cannot ride any horse, no horse, bareback, because he was afraid I might fall off and then end up breaking my tailbone instead of just having a sprain. So I agreed to it, and because I agreed to it, he gave my mother a prescription of Tylenol 3 so that when I was riding, that would take the pain, the edge off. It made me a bit groggy, yes, but I still was okay. It did take pain away, though, I can tell you that. when he got awarded 8th place in trail course, out of, I'm not sure how many competitors, I believe there was over 100. He got 8th place because that was my strong suit in training horses, was trail course. And he got 8th place out of over 100. I was so excited. And he had been in his stall all day long. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and take him to the warm-up arena just so that he can stretch his legs out, you know. And of course, what did I do? I was too lazy to go get my saddle. So I just had his bit and walked him over there, put his bit on, put the lead rope and the halter up on the fence, just like everybody else did, and I got on him bareback. Meanwhile, the warm-up arena was right next to the Western Stunt Show. And it was going, and I was walking him, you know, just exercising him, getting him to walk. You know, I wasn't pushing him to do anything. Like, I didn't want him to trot or gallop. I just wanted him to stretch his legs. And yeah, the Western show was going, and they started shooting, you know, the guns, and Shamrock flipped out because he was like, what the heck is that? So he went kind of up and sideways, and I went up and boom, right on my bum on the ground. Now, I didn't feel a thing because, well, I was, you know, on Tylenol 3. So I didn't want anyone to know. Obviously, there were people in the arena, and they witnessed this happening, but I didn't want my mother or my sisters to know, and they were all in the barn. So I got up, got Shamrock. I thought, okay, he's had enough exercise. Brought him back to the barn, and my mom's like, well, wow, that was fast. She says, you said that you were going to take him out. And I said, yeah. She says, well, did you already take the saddle up? I said, oh, yeah, yes. I took the saddle up. It's all good. Just, you know, just putting him back in the stall. And she's, okay. Yeah. So I kind of, you know, got myself out of that, only to wake up the next morning and I was completely unable to move. I was in so much pain that even standing up, sitting, anything, it was like, it was so bad. And thank God all of the showing was done. It was just basically packing stuff up and getting your horse home. But I remember saying to my mom, you know, can I have one of those pills? Because, I mean, I'm in a lot of pain. And she says, well, you weren't in a lot of pain yesterday. And I said, well, no, but I said, I'm really in a lot of pain. So she gave me one, and it didn't really take the pain away. So on the way home, I was pretty much in tears. I couldn't, even the slightest bump would set shooting pain going up my spine. And I told my mom, I said, this is just really bad. I can't take it anymore. And she said, okay, we're taking you to the emergency room. She said, there's something not right. Of course, she still didn't know that I rode him bareback and fell off of him. So she took me to the emergency room. They x-rayed my tailbone, and it was completely fractured. It literally was snapped. And the doctor came out and told my mom, you know, she's got a severe fracture tailbone. And my mother's like, what? And he said it again. She said, well, how could that have happened? She sprained it, but, you know, she kept trying to figure it out. And he says, all I can tell you is that it is fractured and it's bad, and it is going to take a long time for this to heal. So they gave my mom some more painkillers, stronger ones, and I got home and my mom's like, okay, what did you do? Because you had to have done something to turn a sprain into a severe fracture. So I had to tell her. She's like, oh my God, you were told not to do that. I know. But you know what? I was 15. No excuse, but still, I mean, we do silly things when we're young. Anyway, this is getting to be a very long story, but I wanted to share this with you because that is what I'm thankful for. That is the reason why I'm thankful, is my family, my mother, my stepfather, my sisters were amazing. And unfortunately, my stepfather has passed, and I don't get to see my sisters and my brothers as much as I would like to, but I love them dearly, and I miss them a lot. And I will never forget the things that they have done for me. So anyway, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and end the video. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, please give it that thumbs up. I would greatly appreciate it. And if you didn't like it, I'm okay with that. But if you could be so kind as to go down below and let me know in the comments what you didn't like about the video, I would greatly appreciate that. That way it helps me improve my videos in the future. Also, if you're new to the channel, a big howdy and welcome. If you like what you see and you like what you heard, I hope that you would consider subscribing. And if you do, please don't forget to hit the bell. The bell will indicate when I've uploaded another video. So everyone, I hope that you had a wonderful Christmas. Please be safe during New Year's, and we will talk again real soon. Thank you so much for joining me tonight on the review. Bye everyone.